The Dailywire late Friday into Saturday broke a story. A whistleblower came forward with the receipts. And a lot of people wanted to dismiss it at first, but they had the receipts, they had the documentation. A supervisor for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, for those of you who don't know, helps cities, counties, states, and individuals suffering natural disaster. A supervisor for FEMA ordered FEMA employees to not offer assistance to homes that had Trump signs or Trump flags or any identifying information that that family supported Donald Trump. Think about that. A supervisor for the federal government of the United States said don't help anyone who supports Donald Trump after a natural disaster. The whistleblower has come forward. To her credit, the director of FEMA has come out and said the story is true. We are very sorry. We are going back to try to find families that this woman insisted not be helped. Some of them may be dead, by the way. And this matter is being referred to a prosecutor. This supervisor is probably going to go to prison, assuming Joe Biden doesn't pardon her. Maybe he will. The federal government picked winners and losers, and the losers were Trump supporters. This story's not getting a lot of play today. The timing of it was bad. It came out over the weekend, so everyone could reference it quickly and move on. NBC News, you should note, covered the story and never actually reported in their story that the supervisor was telling employees not to help Trump families. Just a supervisor was politically motivated and was telling employees not to help certain families in Florida. Didn't say why in the whole story. Every other media outlet that covered it accurately, not NBC News. And then the reporter started bullying anyone who pointed out you left out that key detail. She started making your mama jokes. I'm not making that up. She actually did. The NBC News reporter. FEMA. Now, let me tie these two things together, please. You're thinking, Erickson, what two things? Today is Veterans Day. Today is Veterans Day. Many American men and women were willing to sign up for the American military to put their lives on the line. Now, to be fair, there are these stories that came out that some young kids, they signed up for the military thinking there's never going to be war again, so I can get my college paid for me. And then war broke out and they had a total meltdown. But overwhelmingly, the men and women who sign up understand that they are putting their lives at risk for the country. Many of them never have to, thank God. Many of the people in the military, they're playing in logistics roles and things like that, but there are a lot of them who wind up on the front lines. Our incoming Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, is a Marine. The left tried to discredit J.D. Vance's military service, given where he was and what he did in Iraq, but he wound up actually seeing combat. Ron DeSantis in Florida, given his position, they said, oh, he was just a lawyer, actually. Ron DeSantis was a lawyer for some of the toughest men in Iraq, and he wound up having to be with them in combat because of what they were doing and how he had to work with them. Then there's Tim Walz, who lied about his military record. The military, when he had to go to Iraq, he decided to quit the military. He was perfectly fine serving in logistics in Europe, but the moment he was going to enter into a combat zone, he's like, tap out, got to run for office and lie about my military service. But our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, our space cadets, our Space Force, we can't forget about them. They serve this country in good times and hard, in peacetime and war, and they do an admirable job. Here comes a FEMA supervisor who actually designated that there was a class of American citizen that her employees under her were not to help. You don't see our military operating that way. Well, we can't help these people. No, they follow their orders and they do it admirably. This FEMA employee, contractor, apparently is a nurse who works for a healthcare system but also serves as a contractor for FEMA, said, nope, you can't help the Trump supporters for it. By the way, for those of you who don't believe this is now documented. FEMA has acknowledged it is true. They have severed the relationship with the contractor. They have turned the matter over to prosecutors to look at. And here's the thing. What I'm finding in talking to individuals about these situations is that when Donald Trump decides to purge the bureaucracy, he's got to take on the contractor class, because a lot of what the federal government does is actually outsourced to other people. Like this situation, this was not a federal employee. This was an outside contractor who was supervising federal employees in the area. If you want to eradicate this, you've got to eradicate the contractors who are wokes. Embedding within government disrupt. A buddy of mine actually sent me a note and said, remember the woman in Virginia? She was in a coffee shop claiming some level of foreign expertise, and she was yelling at a black woman, berating a black woman in a coffee shop last week for voting for Donald Trump. That woman has been identified. She's a contractor for the federal government. She's not an employee of the federal government. She's an outside contractor. Time and time again, it's the contractors, not just the employees. Our military will lay down their lives for people in this country. These outside contractors want some Americans to die. And we're seeing this now with the left as they come to terms with this election. When they're not blasting each other, they're attacking American citizens, blaming American citizens, saying the American people are bad. It's the American people. Maybe, just maybe, whichever side loses should actually understand that Americans are great at dealing with their own self-interest. That's why the free market works. Because Americans know what's best for their families. And they know these past number of years, things haven't been great. They know the cost of food is up, the cost of butter is up, the cost of eggs are up, the cost of milk is up, the cost of beef is up, the cost of chicken is up, the cost of gas is up, the cost of groceries is up. And their pay hasn't kept up. And for 4 years, the American media lectured Americans that you don't know how good you have it. Actually, they know exactly how bad they have it. And they voted accordingly, and they voted because of that, and now they're the bad guys. They can't win. The left screwed up the economy, and now the left is blaming the Americans. It very much is the Bertolt Brecht poem come to life. For those of you unfamiliar, if you didn't get my morning email, Bertolt Brecht was an East German poet. There was an uprising in East Germany. And all the important people lived on a road called the Stalin Allee. It's essentially a road named after Joe Stalin. That's where all of the leadership of East Germany lived. And Bertolt Brecht wrote a very sarcastic poem after this uprising against East German policies. After the uprising of the 17th of June, the secretary of the Writers' Union had leaflets distributed in the Stalin Allee stating that the people had forfeited the confidence of the government and could win it back only by redoubled efforts. Would it not be easier in that case for the government to dissolve the people and elect another? You get it? Instead of the people dissolving the government wants to dissolve the people. That's the problem. That's the situation. The government is run by a group of elites who don't particularly like us. And one of these people, a supervisor in Florida after a hurricane came through, said, don't help the Trump supporters. Our military, many of them come from working class communities, and they help every American, rich and poor. It's the elite. It's the elite who hate you. And in your hate for them, you threw them out of office last Tuesday, and boy, are they seething.